Commander Riley Jackson's hands trembled as he stared at the screen in front of him. The message kept playing over and over, each time making his heart beat faster. He was sitting in the control room of the research ship New Horizon, and what he was seeing didn't make any sense. The transmission was broken up, full of static, but the fear in the voice was clear. Someone was in terrible trouble. They were being attacked by something called the Kithra Swarm, and they were begging for help. "Sir, I've checked this 3 times now," said Lieutenant Jessica Mills from her station nearby. Her voice was shaky. "This signal is definitely coming from Sector 7 Alpha. But that's impossible." Riley looked at her with confusion. "What do you mean impossible?" Jessica pulled up the old records on her screen. "Look at this, sir. The Galactic Council marked that entire sector as dead space over 200 years ago. They said nothing could live there. The gravity is too strong, the storms are too violent, and the radiation would cook any living thing in a matter of hours." Riley studied the files. Earth was listed as a death world, a planet so dangerous that no civilized species could possibly survive there. The gravity was 3 times stronger than what most aliens could handle. The weather included storms that could tear apart buildings. The radiation from their star would kill most galactic species before they could even land. "But sir," Jessica continued, "according to these records, there was a species there once. They called themselves humans. The Council wrote them off as extinct centuries ago when their planet became too hostile." Riley felt a chill run down his spine. "Play the message again. Full volume this time." The speakers crackled to life, and a desperate human voice filled the room. "This is Colony Director Blake Turner of New Eden Mining Station. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. We have 8,000 civilians here, including women and children. If anyone receives this transmission, please help us. The creatures are breaking through our defenses. They're unlike anything we've ever seen. They just keep coming and coming. We can't hold them much longer. Please, if there's anyone out there who can hear this." Then came the screams. Terrible, heart-wrenching screams that made everyone in the control room go quiet. The sound of weapons firing, explosions, and something else, something that sounded like giant insects chittering and clicking. The transmission cut off suddenly, leaving only static. Riley's stomach dropped. "How long has this been broadcasting?" 3 weeks, sir," Jessica replied quietly. "It's been sent out on every frequency they could manage. Emergency channels, military bands, even old civilian frequencies that haven't been used in decades." Riley stood up and began pacing around the small control room. His mind was racing. According to everything they knew, humans were supposed to be extinct. Earth was supposed to be empty, a dead rock floating in space where nothing could live. But here was proof that not only were humans still alive, they had somehow managed to build colonies on other worlds. "Sir," called out technician Mike Rodriguez from the communication station. "I'm picking up more transmissions from that sector. Faint ones, but they're there." "Put them on speaker," Riley ordered. The room filled with static, but underneath it, they could hear voices. Human voices, speaking in their native language, coordinating defenses, calling out positions, trying desperately to protect their people from something terrible. "They're still fighting," Riley whispered. "After 3 weeks, they're still holding on." Jessica looked up from her screen with wide eyes. "Sir, if humans really are still alive out there, and if they've managed to survive on a death world like Earth, then they must be incredibly tough. I mean, think about it, they live with gravity that would crush most species, weather that would kill us instantly, and radiation that would cook our cells." Riley nodded slowly. "And if they're tough enough to survive Earth, then they're probably tough enough to put up one hell of a fight against whatever's attacking them." "But sir," Mike called out, "even if they are tough, the Kithra swarm has never been stopped. I've heard stories about them from traders. They're like a plague that sweeps across worlds, consuming everything in their path. No military force has ever successfully fought them off." Riley looked around the room at his crew. These weren't soldiers, they were scientists and researchers. But in that moment, listening to those desperate human voices calling out across the void of space, he felt something he'd never felt before. A burning need to help, to answer that call for aid. "Sir," Jessica said quietly, "what are we going to do? Our ship isn't equipped for combat. We're just a research vessel." Riley was quiet for a long moment, thinking hard. Then he walked over to the long-range communications console and began entering coordinates. "We can't fight the Kithra ourselves," he said firmly. "But we can make sure the right people hear this message. There are human colonies out there, and they need to know what's happening." His fingers flew across the controls, sending the distress call out on every channel he could access, broadcasting it toward known human territories in the Outer Rim. "If humans really are as tough as these files suggest," Riley said, looking around at his crew, "then maybe, just maybe, they're tough enough to mount a rescue mission that could actually succeed." As the transmission shot out across space toward human territory, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the war room aboard the massive battleship Terra's Wrath, staring at the holographic display that showed their entire fleet spread across the solar system. The distress call from New Eden Colony had reached every human military base, every outpost, every ship within 50 light-years. And now every single commander was looking to her for answers. The room was packed with the best military minds humanity had to offer. These weren't politicians or diplomats. These were warriors who had spent their entire lives preparing for the day when humanity might need to fight for its survival. But none of them had ever imagined a situation quite like this. "Kate, you need to think about this carefully," said General Robert Hayes, leaning forward across the massive tactical table. His weathered face showed the strain of decades of military service. "We haven't heard anything from Earth or the outer colonies in over 200 years. This could be anyone using our old communication frequencies to lure us into an ambush." Morrison studied the audio analysis on her screen. Every inflection, every word pattern, every piece of slang had been run through their most advanced computers. "Look at these reports, Robert. The speech patterns are perfect. The emergency codes are correct. Even the way they pronounce certain words matches our databases exactly. These aren't aliens trying to copy human speech. These are our people." Around the table, other fleet commanders were having whispered conversations. Morrison could see the worry in their eyes. What she was proposing wasn't just dangerous, it was potentially suicide. Captain Tom Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Admiral, with all due respect, the jump you're talking about would be the longest hyperspace journey any human ship has ever attempted. We'd be going completely blind into territory we know nothing about, against an enemy we've never faced." Morrison nodded. "I understand the risks, Tom. But put yourself in their position. 8,000 civilians, including families with children, being hunted by something called the Kithra Swarm. They've been fighting for 3 weeks with no help, no reinforcements, no hope except for that distress signal they keep broadcasting." She touched a control, and the desperate voice of Colony Director Blake Turner filled the room once again. "Please, if there's anyone out there who can hear this, we need help. The creatures are breaking through our defenses. We can't hold them much longer." The room went silent. Every person there had family, friends, people they cared about. The thought of 8,000 humans facing extinction while they debated was almost unbearable. Captain Beth Santos spoke up from her position at the far end of the table. Her voice was steady but determined. "Ma'am, my battle group can be ready for departure in 6 hours. The Thunderbolt and her escort ships are fully armed and supplied. If we're doing this, I want to be part of it." Morrison looked around the room at the faces of her commanders. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity, and she could see the same thought in all their eyes. Somewhere out there, their people were dying, and they had the power to help. "Robert," she said, turning to General Hayes, "I know you have concerns. But think about what we know of human history. We've never been a species that abandons our own. When people are in trouble, when they're calling for help, we answer. That's who we are. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily. You're right, Kate. If there's even a chance those are our people out there, we have to try. What do you need from me? Morrison smiled grimly. I need every combat-ready ship we have. This isn't going to be a small operation. If the Kithra swarm is as dangerous as the reports suggest, we need to hit them with everything we've got. She began inputting commands into the tactical display, and ship after ship lit up green across the solar system. Battleships emerged from hidden bases in the asteroid belt. Cruisers powered up their engines at lunar facilities. Fighter squadrons prepared to launch from orbital platforms around Mars. All available ships, Morrison announced. We're going in heavy. What the humans didn't know was that their solar system wasn't as isolated as they thought. Hidden monitoring stations, placed there centuries ago by various alien species, had been quietly watching Earth. Most alien governments believed humans were extinct, but a few kept sensors in place just to be sure. As the human fleet began powering up their engines, those hidden sensors started detecting energy readings they had never seen before. The signatures were massive, far beyond what any known species could produce. Ships were emerging from locations that the aliens had assumed were empty space, asteroid bases, lunar facilities, orbital platforms that had been invisible to their scans. On a monitoring station hidden behind Jupiter's largest moon, an alien technician stared at his screen in disbelief. The energy readings showed dozens of massive warships, each one built like a fortress designed to survive in the harsh vacuum of space. These weren't exploration vessels or research ships. These were weapons of war, built by a species that had learned to fight in the most hostile environment imaginable. The technician reached for his emergency communicator with shaking hands. This information needed to reach the Galactic Council immediately. The humans weren't extinct. They had been hiding in their Deathworld system, building a war fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As Admiral Morrison's fleet prepared for the longest jump in human history, alien monitoring stations across the galaxy began broadcasting the same shocking message: the Deathworlders were alive, they were armed, and they were coming. The galaxy was about to learn that reports of humanity's extinction had been greatly exaggerated. And they were about to discover what happened when you threatened the people that Deathworlders called their own. The bridge of the Terra's wrath was dead silent as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. Admiral Kate Morrison stood behind her command chair, watching as the massive viewscreen displayed their destination. In the distance, she could see the small dots of light that marked the Galactic Council's research station. Almost immediately, their communications console lit up with an incoming transmission. The voice that came through was clearly not human. It had a strange, musical quality that suggested the speaker had multiple vocal cords. Unknown vessels, this is Galactic Council Station Omega, 7. You have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately and state your business here. Morrison walked forward and nodded to her communications officer. She had practiced this moment in her head during the long journey here, but now that it was actually happening, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. This was humanity's first contact with alien life in over 2 centuries. This is Admiral Kate Morrison of the Terran Defense Fleet, she said in a clear, steady voice. We are responding to a distress call from New Eden Mining Colony. Commander, what is your current tactical situation? On the alien station, Commander Vexhai nearly fell out of his chair. His 3 large eyes went wide with shock as he stared at the readouts on his screen. The energy signatures coming from the approaching fleet were unlike anything in their databases. Each ship was putting out power levels that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. Admiral Morrison, Vexhai said slowly, his voice filled with confusion, there must be some mistake. According to our records, humans have been extinct for over 200 years. Your homeworld of Earth was classified as completely uninhabitable. Nothing could survive in such a hostile environment. Morrison's laugh was sharp and cold. It was the laugh of someone who had heard that kind of underestimation before. Well, Commander, I hate to break it to you, but Earth is still exactly where it's always been. And so are we. Now, I didn't travel 50 light-years just to discuss our medical records. There are people in danger, and I need to know what we're dealing with. Lieutenant Jessica Mills looked up from her sensor station with urgency in her voice. Admiral, I'm detecting massive biological signatures moving toward the mining station. Whatever these things are, they're huge, and there are thousands of them. Based on their current speed, they'll reach the colony in approximately 4 hours. Commander Vexhi's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The Kithra swarm. Admiral Morrison, you need to understand what you're facing. The Kithra are not like any enemy you've ever encountered. They're a hive mind species that has consumed dozens of worlds across this sector of the galaxy. They don't negotiate, they don't retreat, and they don't show mercy. They simply devour everything in their path. Morrison studied the tactical display that was now showing both the approaching alien swarm and the human colony they were targeting. The numbers were staggering, thousands of bioships, each one the size of a small moon, moving in perfect coordination toward 8,000 helpless civilians. Commander, Morrison said, has anyone ever successfully fought off a Kithra attack? There was a long pause before Vexhi answered. No, Admiral. Never. The best any species has ever managed is a partial evacuation before their worlds fell. The Kithra adapt to every weapon, overcome every defense, and their numbers seem endless. Morrison could feel the tension on her bridge. Her officers were listening to every word, and she could see the worry in their faces. They had come here expecting to fight some unknown enemy, but now they were learning they were up against something that had never been defeated. Admiral, called out Captain Tom Rodriguez from the tactical station, the colony is broadcasting again. They're reporting that their outer defenses have been breached. They're falling back to their central compound, but they estimate they can only hold out for maybe 6 more hours at most. Morrison closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about those 8,000 people, men, women, children, who were counting on them. She thought about the journey they had just made, the longest hyperspace jump in human history, undertaken because someone had called for help. When she opened her eyes, her voice was filled with the kind of determination that had carried humanity through countless wars and disasters throughout their history. Commander Vexhi, I appreciate the warning about the Kithra. I really do. But here's something you need to understand about humans, we don't leave people behind. We don't abandon civilians who are calling for help. And we sure as hell don't back down from a fight just because the odds are bad. She turned to address her entire bridge crew, her voice carrying to every station. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Battle stations, everyone. Check your weapons, charge your shields, and prep for combat. We have 4 hours to get between those civilians and whatever's coming for them. Lieutenant Mills looked up from her console with amazement. Ma'am, I'm reading the energy signatures from our fleet. The alien station's sensors are going crazy trying to analyze our ships. Morrison smiled grimly. Let them look, Lieutenant. They're about to learn something that apparently got lost in their history books. Humans don't go extinct that easily. And we really don't like it when someone threatens innocent people. She pressed the fleet-wide communication button. All ships, we're going in hot. Time to show this galaxy what happens when you mess with our people. As the human fleet accelerated toward the besieged colony, Commander Vexhi watched his sensors in stunned silence. These ships moved with a coordination and purpose that spoke of a military tradition forged in the harshest conditions imaginable. The galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before, Deathworlders going to war. Captain Jake Sullivan felt his boots clang against the metal deck of the boarding pod as it slammed into the side of the massive Kithra bioship. Around him, 20 of humanity's finest Marines were locked and loaded, ready for whatever waited inside the alien vessel. Breach successful, shouted Corporal Mike Chen from the cutting station. Hull integrity is holding. We've got atmosphere on the other side, but it's not breathable for most species. Sullivan grinned behind his helmet. Good thing we're not most species. Marines, you know the drill. These things have never faced boarders who can fight in hard vacuum, radiation, and toxic atmosphere all at the same time. Let's show them what Deathworlders are made of. The airlock cycled open, and the Marines poured into the organic corridors of the Kithra ship. The walls were alive, pulsing with some kind of biological energy, and the air was thick with spores that would have killed any other galactic species within minutes. But human environmental suits were built to handle far worse conditions than this. Move, move, move. Sullivan barked as his squad advanced through the twisting passages. The corridors were clearly designed for creatures much larger than humans, with ceilings that stretched high above their heads and floors that felt squishy under their boots. Sergeant Beth Carter was right behind him, her plasma rifle charging with a high-pitched whine. Contact ahead, Cap. These things are bigger than the intel suggested. The first Kithra warrior came around the corner like a nightmare made real. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, with multiple arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and a head that looked like a cross between an insect and something from humanity's worst nightmares. Its chitinous armor gleamed under the ship's bioluminescent lighting. Carter's plasma rifle fired, and the blast carved clean through the creature's torso. These things are ugly as sin, Cap, but they sure don't like plasma fire. More Kithra warriors poured into the corridor, their claws scraping against the organic walls as they charged. But the human Marines were ready. They had trained for decades in environments that would kill most aliens, inside asteroid mines where the air was toxic, in the radiation-soaked rings of Jupiter, in the crushing gravity wells near black holes. Johnson, Rodriguez, take the left flank. Sullivan ordered. Carter, Chen, with me down the center. These bugs might be tough, but they've never fought anyone who grew up on a death world. The battle was fierce but short. The Kithra were designed to overwhelm their enemies through sheer numbers and biological adaptation, but they had never faced an enemy quite like humans. These Marines fought with a combination of high-tech weapons and primitive savagery that the hive mind couldn't understand. Outside the bioship, the larger space battle was raging with incredible intensity. Admiral Morrison watched from the Bridge of Terra's wrath as her fleet engaged the Kithra swarm with devastating efficiency. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Jessica Mills from her station, our ships are taking hits from their bioweapons, but the damage is minimal. It looks like their organic weapons are designed to target specific molecular structures that don't exist in our hull materials. Morrison nodded. That's because they've never fought ships built to survive solar flares and asteroid storms. Our hulls were designed to handle punishment that would crack most alien vessels in half. On the view screen, human fighters screamed past at speeds that defied belief. The pilots were pulling G-forces that would have turned most alien pilots into liquid, but humans had evolved under Earth's crushing gravity. What was deadly acceleration to other species was just another day at the office for human pilots. Down on New Eden Colony, Director Blake Turner pressed his face against the observation window of the command center. He had been preparing to die, expecting to watch helplessly as the Kithra swarm consumed his people. Instead, he was witnessing the most incredible space battle he had ever seen. Human fighters danced between the massive bioships like deadly insects, their weapons carving through alien flesh with surgical precision. The pilots were doing maneuvers that should have been impossible, using the colony's gravity well and nearby asteroids as weapons against their enemies. "This is Admiral Morrison," came a voice over the colony's communication system. "Colony Director Turner, we're getting you out of here. Prepare your people for immediate evacuation. We'll hold these things off while you get to the transport ships." Turner felt tears streaming down his face. After 3 weeks of fighting, after losing hope that help would ever come, the cavalry had finally arrived. And they were everything the legends said humans could be. But something else was happening in space that none of the humans could see. Deep in the largest Kithra bioship, the hive mind was experiencing something it had never felt before in its long history of consuming worlds. For centuries, the Kithra had swept across the galaxy like a plague, devouring everything in their path. They had faced desperate defenders, advanced weapons, and coordinated military responses, but they had always won through sheer numbers and their ability to adapt to any threat. But these humans were different. They fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive brutality that the hive mind couldn't process. Their ships absorbed damage that should have destroyed them. Their warriors operated in environments that should have killed them. Their pilots performed maneuvers that should have been physically impossible. For the first time in its existence, the Kithra hive mind felt fear. These Deathworld creatures fought like they had been born in hell and trained in chaos. Every tactical adaptation the hive mind attempted was countered with something new and terrifying. The mental links that connected the entire swarm began to fracture under the stress. Individual bioships started making their own decisions, breaking from the coordinated attack patterns that had made the Kithra unstoppable. And then, impossibly, something that had never happened in recorded galactic history occurred. The Kithra swarm began to retreat. Captain Sullivan's voice crackled over the fleet communication system. "Admiral Morrison, this is Sullivan. The bioship we boarded is dead in the water. These things are pulling back across the entire front. I think we actually scared them." Morrison smiled as she watched the massive alien fleet turning away from the colony. "Outstanding work, Captain. All ships, maintain pursuit until they're completely out of the system. Let's make sure they understand that this is what happens when they mess with humans." As the human fleet chased the retreating Kithra swarm away from New Eden Colony, word of the impossible victory began to spread across the galaxy. The unstoppable swarm had been stopped. The Deathworlders had returned, and they were everything the galaxy's nightmares had warned them about. The docking bay of the Terra's Wrath was filled with the controlled chaos of a successful rescue operation. Director Blake Turner stepped off the transport shuttle with shaking legs, still unable to believe that he and his people were actually safe. Behind him, hundreds of colonists were being helped by human medical teams, their faces showing a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and amazement. Admiral Kate Morrison was waiting at the bottom of the shuttle ramp. When Turner saw her, he stumbled forward and gripped her hand with both of his, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Admiral, we thought we were alone out here," he said, his voice breaking. "For 3 weeks, we kept broadcasting that distress call, never really believing anyone would hear it. We thought humanity had forgotten about the outer colonies." Morrison's stern expression softened as she looked at this man who had somehow kept 8,000 people alive against impossible odds. "Director Turner, I need you to understand something that apparently got lost over the years. No human fights alone. That's not how we work. That's never been how we work." She gestured around the massive docking bay, where human crews were efficiently organizing the evacuation. "When someone calls for help, we answer. When our people are in danger, we come running. It doesn't matter if it's across the street or across the galaxy." Turner looked around in amazement at the operation taking place around them. Human medics were treating wounded colonists with equipment he had never seen before. Engineers were already discussing plans to repair the mining station's damaged systems. Supply officers were distributing food, water, and medical supplies with an efficiency that seemed almost impossible. "How did you do it?" Turner asked quietly. "How did you build all this? The galaxy told us that Earth was dead, that humans had gone extinct centuries ago." Morrison smiled grimly. "Earth was never dead, Director. It was just, misunderstood. The Galactic Council called it a death world and wrote us off because they couldn't imagine anyone surviving in such a hostile environment. What they didn't realize is that living on a death world doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger." She pointed to a group of Marines who were helping elderly colonists down from the shuttle. These people grew up breathing recycled air in asteroid mines. They learned to fight in zero gravity and radiation that would cook most aliens. They've spent their entire lives dealing with emergencies that would destroy other civilizations. "Admiral Morrison," came a nervous voice from behind them. Commander Vex High, the alien station commander, had been transported aboard the human ship for what the humans diplomatically called debriefing. His 3 eyes were darting around nervously as he took in the organized efficiency of the human operation. "Commander," Morrison acknowledged. "I trust your people got a good look at how we handle business out here." Vexhai shifted uncomfortably. "Admiral, I've been in contact with the Galactic Council High Command. They would like to discuss humanity's potential membership in the Council. Your actions here have caused quite a stir across known space." Morrison studied the alien commander carefully. She could see the fear in his eyes, mixed with something that might have been respect. "We'll consider your offer, Commander. But you need to understand something about humans before we go any further." She walked over to a viewport that showed the human fleet in formation around the evacuated colonists. "Where we come from, you don't abandon people who call for help. Ever. You don't ignore distress calls because they're inconvenient or dangerous. You don't write off entire populations because they live in places you consider uninhabitable. That's not negotiable." Vexhai nodded quickly. "Of course, Admiral. The Council is very interested in learning more about human capabilities." "I'm sure they are," Morrison replied dryly. "Especially after what happened to the Kithara swarm." What neither of them mentioned was that news of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy at light speed. Every monitoring station, every trade route, every diplomatic channel was buzzing with the same impossible story: the Kithara swarm had been defeated. The unstoppable plague that had consumed dozens of worlds had been turned back by a species that was supposed to be extinct. On the trade station at Kepler 9, alien merchants watched grainy footage that had been smuggled out by long-range sensors. The videos showed human soldiers moving through Kithara bioships like unstoppable forces of nature, cutting through chitinous armor and organic walls as if they were made of paper. On the peaceful world of Centauri Prime, families gathered around their communication screens to watch reports of human fighters performing impossible maneuvers in space, pulling G-forces that should have liquefied any pilot. On military bases across the galaxy, alien commanders studied tactical reports that seemed too fantastic to believe. Human ships had weathered bioweapons that could crack dreadnoughts. Human marines had boarded enemy vessels in environments that would kill most species in minutes. But perhaps most importantly, on worlds that lived in constant fear of the Kithara swarm, ordinary people looked up at the stars with something they hadn't felt in centuries: hope. On the farming world of New Harvest, where families had lived in underground bunkers for decades, children asked their parents if it was true that the scary monsters in space had been defeated. On the research colony of Deep Space 7, scientists who had spent years studying Kithara attack patterns tried to understand how anyone could have developed tactics to counter the hive mind's coordination. On refugee ships filled with survivors from consumed worlds, people who had given up all hope of returning home began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, their worlds could be reclaimed. As Admiral Morrison's fleet prepared to escort the New Eden colonists to safety, she stood in her ready room reviewing reports from across human space. The rescue mission had revealed something that changed everything: humanity wasn't just surviving in their corner of the galaxy. They were thriving. Hidden colonies, secret military bases, research stations, and mining operations had emerged from the shadows after centuries of isolation. The humans had been building, preparing, growing stronger while the rest of the galaxy assumed they were dead. Morrison opened a communication channel to Fleet Command. "This is Admiral Morrison to all human territories. Operation New Dawn is a success. The colonists are safe, the Kithara have been repelled, and first contact with the Galactic Council has been established." She paused, thinking about the future. "Prepare all military assets for possible deployment. Something tells me this is just the beginning. The galaxy is about to learn that reports of humanity's extinction were greatly exaggerated." As her words spread across human space, from Earth to the Outer Rim colonies, a single message became clear: the Deathworlders had returned, and they were taking no prisoners. The age of hiding was over. Humanity's time had come.